In this episode of the Cole Memo, we will explore a lesser-known Illinois cannabis tradition, Hash Wednesday. The annual event served as a protest for the legalization and decriminalization of cannabis and other drugs. It was held in the Quad at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Throughout this series on Hash Wednesday, I'll engage in conversations with participants spanning different generations. We'll be diving into their unique experiences at Hash Wednesday. During these discussions, our guests share memories, photographs, newspaper clippings, and of course, some remarkable stories. For this particular episode of the Cole Memo, I had the privilege of recording at OK Cannabis, a complex located in Wheeling, Illinois. OK Cannabis has a few things going on in the complex, including a bakery, a bar, a dispensary, and a cannabis consumption lounge, which is where we recorded this episode. This is the Cole Memo. I'm your host, Cole Preston. Every episode is released in audio, video, and transcript format. To find the transcript, audio, or video version of any episode, please refer to the description of the episode that you're listening to. Within that description, you can find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. If you're unable to locate the episode description on whichever platform you're listening from, simply note the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. Find the corresponding episode on our website, and from there, you'll be able to access the audio, video, and transcripts for that episode. You might also find any links that we reference during the episode so that you might be able to do your own research. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, then you're listening to this episode later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. Once again, that's thecolememo.com/Patreon. It's a great way to support our show. One of the best ways to support our show is absolutely free. Subscribe to or follow our show. Leave us a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, or post a review. Your engagement and support is appreciated. Today is November 2nd, 2023, and this episode was captured on October 28th, 2023. Enjoy this episode of The Cole Memo.
Catholics mark the beginning of Lent with Ash Wednesday.
The season asks the faithful to repent for past sins by giving up a vice. But as WCIA3's Matt Metcalf discovered, an unrelated holiday with a similar name is all about indulgence. It's from the vault.
It's been more than 2 years since Illinois legalized recreational marijuana, but for decades, smoking cannabis was part of the counterculture, a sign of resistance. And at the U of I, Hash Wednesday brought secret vices out into the public eye. Stan Childress filed this report from the U of I in 1978.
An English teacher, this reporter once was, so where prose doesn't do, perhaps verse does. For this is a special day on the U of I Quad, a day whose activities were once thought mod. It's an anniversary of sorts, 1 week delayed, but as these faces tell, the folks aren't dismayed. Hash Wednesday, they call it, coming once each year, perhaps as a reminder of the things many fear.
I can't understand why anybody would have any fear for it whatsoever.
A lot of people know nothing about marijuana at all, and it frightens them.
Older generation doesn't know about it.
I think a lot of the society does fear it.
Let's call these things drugs of the subculture set, but just how sub are they? We may discover yet. Could we be moving in a direction unknown, or is this an old path generations have known? We suspect the latter, that is, this trail is old, aged wine and new flasks, this tale is being told. By gosh, Hear what's said by the Fords and Mills. Hark, hark, young folks. This stuff really kills. The purpose of this day, to bite the Solon's ear. This stuff called hash, we need not fear. Illegal it is, we've heard the law say, but there were no arrests on this hash day. It's as if to say, let's all take a pause and consider decriminalization, which is their cause. Let's remember one thing, the Solons aren't deaf. Remember, too, for them, the issue is complex. So they've had their day, and a sunny one at that, and we're sure next year they'll be back. And I've had my day with some Charles Osgood flair. And for those of you who broke no laws today, it just doesn't seem fair. Stan Childress, Channel 3 News, at the University of Illinois, which has a lot of reason, but no rhyme. This reporter is out of time.
While marijuana might be legal now, forget lighting up anything on the U of I quad. The entire campus went smoke-free, even outdoors, in 2014. From the vault, I'm Matt.
Yeah. Well, and you've got your food here, you've got drinks here.
This is a special one.
It's a perfect mixture.
Yeah, you don't have to leave.
Yeah,
how nice
you
is
don't
that?
have to leave. Yeah,
it's sort of like a little. Yeah, it's everywhere.
I don't
it's sort of like
leave.
a little Disneyland for adults.
Yeah, I don't want to leave.
No need. Let's fire it up. I mean,
let's do it, dude. Well, Tony, how would you introduce yourself? I've got you here as part of my Hash Wednesday series, but before we get into that, let's just talk Tony. How would you introduce yourself?
Well, I've been in cannabis for about 2 years now on the business side, working in mergers and acquisitions, where I help find buyers with assets that I represent across the country. I represent edible companies, grow operation, dispensaries, and some ancillary businesses as well in cannabis. So I am a connector, a finder. Through my vast network in cannabis across the country, I've put the right buyers with the assets. My assets are across the country in the limited markets as well as the mature markets.
Do you have any, and I'm just asking you, do you have any name drops? Can you name drop any ones you've been involved in, or is that not something really somebody in your position does?
You know what? It's not probably the right place or time. However, it's single state operators primarily that may have 1 or 2 dispensaries and are looking to get to a certain magic number. It appears that magic number is 10. And that seems to go based on what a state will allow you to do. A lot of groups want to make sure they get to their max. They want as much exposure. And because one-offs rarely will work in cannabis. You can't have one dispensary. And if anything, you want to have a vertical. That's really the way to make money in cannabis. So I help companies grow in cannabis, whether they're growing into a new market or an existing market they already are present in.
Yeah, and for folks, just really quick, for folks that were wondering what is vertical, can you quickly explain that?
Of course, sorry. So a vertical is more than one component of a cannabis industry. It's almost sort of taking it from the seed, a grow operation typically. You may then own a manufacturing where you could take that flower, convert it to oil. You can do infusion products as well. And then you have also then the distribution. The distribution is the retail. So in fact, in Illinois, as an example, is you can carry as much product of your own as long as you have 30% representative of other brands, which is important because you want to have plenty of shelf space and give customers variety. But when it comes to dollars and cents, which at the end of the day, it's a business, you want to make sure you control your costs. And if you're putting your own products in your stores, then you're making it on both ends.
Yeah, and if I could put it like maybe a little bit more bluntly for folks, like you save money if you're giving product to yourself, but if you have to purchase it from somebody else, you are doing just that. You're paying for the product. You're also paying them a little bit a piece so that they can profit.
It's true.
So if you grow it your own and you're selling your own, that's where that vertical integration comes in,
if
right?
you think about it, we can bring it back to the old illicit days. That's what people did. They grew weed at home and they sold it on the street and they made money. And, it's really no different other than obviously we're in a blessed time that we have regulations that allow legalized marijuana, which is something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. To me, that is not only a dream come true, but it makes perfect sense. I always say, go to a bar and how many fights happen because people are drunk? You go to a consumption party and all you're pretty much are going to see are hugs and smiles. And the difference is the effects that certain drugs or alcohol have on people. So much like prohibition that we went through way before even my time. Yeah. We went through that where, alcohol wasn't viable or legal, and then it was all bootlegged and so forth. No different than cannabis. Fortunately, we're in a time where cannabis is catching up with that. Today, you drive down the street, you'll see multiple gas stations, and you'll see multiple Starbucks, and you'll see multiple liquor stores. What's going to happen is, as time goes on, you're going to see multiple dispensaries down that same street. Because as time goes on, more and more, awareness, more and more acceptance, and you're seeing it everywhere, in every state. More and more acceptance coming on.
Well said. Well said. And again, before we get into the content of our conversation today, I thought it'd be cool to tell people how we met. I was standing outside smoking a joint at Benzinga, and you and I believe it was a person named Christine.
Hernandez.
Yep.
She's a colleague of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Benzinga, which if anybody who's watching doesn't know, is they're the largest media in cannabis as far as outreach and exposure. And they come from the business standpoint, and the investors is their focus. And they have 2 conferences a year, one in Chicago, one in Miami. And in Chicago, this is also kind of a cool thing. There's very few business conferences that you can go to where you walk out the door and there's 25 people passing around joints. That's what this conference is like, because it's cannabis friendly.
Yeah.
And we're in a day where you can do that. So yeah, I was walking by and saw Cole, and right away recognized him because I told him, and it was kind of funny. I felt like a little kind of a Cole geek. I was like, hey Cole, dude, I really like your work. I really do. I appreciate your work, and I have liked it. And I was so glad that I got to know you before I met you. And it was right away, I'm like, we got to smoke a joint together. Because,
I think we ended up smoking a few.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. But, the whole thing about conferences like that, and just the whole cannabis community, and why I love working in this industry, is you don't have jerks. You know what? You have people that care about one another and actually care about wanting this industry to grow, because it's such a new legalized industry. So people want to see it succeed. And the reality is, the only way cannabis will succeed is through partnerships, helping one another out, making sure that you support each other's brands. And people do that in cannabis. And I think that's what makes it a very different place to work in.
Yeah, and I think you'll appreciate this plug. When you said hi to me, I couldn't put my finger on the fact of, why do you look familiar? And you ended up telling me why, but I also, going back through my footage, I was like, oh, he was literally on stage at Benzinga giving out an award. Do you want to tell people about that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and borrow a lighter if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for bringing that up. No, I appreciate that. So I was recently asked to be the chairman of the Cannabis Hall of Fame, which is opening up in Las Vegas at Planet 13. And if any of your viewers have never been to Planet 13 in Las Vegas, it's a spectacle. It's the largest dispensary in the country. And they have 146,000 visitors come there a year. And part of that is they're building a 13,000 square foot, fully immersive facility called Cannabis. Cannabis is going to be a room where it's going to be one of the best photo taking opportunities, where each room is going to be trippy. One room you're going to feel like you're upside down in the room, and another room is going to be about the history of the plant and where it comes from. Another room is going to be about medicinal, but it's all going to be very, very unique. And housed in there is going to be the Cannabis Hall of Fame. And Cannabis Hall of Fame, which already has 44 inductees, including many people from a celebrity standpoint you would think about, from a Snoop Dogg to, of course, Willie Nelson, and among also a lot of politicians, states that have been recognized as being first in cannabis. So this is an opportunity where we're going to have the chance to recognize the history of cannabis, the people that made cannabis what it is today, not just from a marketing standpoint, but from a early on medicinal standpoint and doing the initial studies and all that. But it's also bringing the cultures together. Another thing that's really unique about cannabis is it's brought many cultures together of diversity, from business, different cultures, different backgrounds, and it's bringing it together for a new industry that have to harmonize together in order to be successful. So anyway, the reason, Cole, you were kind enough to mention, is the Cannabis Hall of Fame. It's an exciting project that's coming up, and I hope for you to be there when we open up in the first quarter of next year.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I feel I wish I would have brought my chillum you gave me.
Oh, I brought you one. Are you kidding?
You brought me a good. Okay, good. I was gonna say I really like that chillum and I still use it. So
yeah, so that's an exciting project that's coming out with the Cannabis Hall of Fame, and it's an exciting time in cannabis. New brands are starting to emerge here in Illinois. Some of the craft growers that have taken a while, I think we're up to like 7 now that have opened up their doors, and now some of their brands are hitting the shelves. So I know here in Illinois, it's good to see new brands. We have very few brands, considering we're one of the most powerful sales markets. We're number 3 in the market across the country as far as sales. And so it's a good time to be in cannabis in Illinois.
Yeah.
Speaking of Illinois.
Yeah, I was about to say, speaking of Illinois, and if you saw me pulling up, it's because I've got like a little set list of questions that I've been asking people about Hash Wednesday. They're super easy, so it's not like I hope I didn't just take you back to UIUC pop quiz.
First off, it's you, not UIUC.
UIUC?
Oh, yeah, I guess you could call it that. People do call it that. See, you're from Champaign, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You call that from. This the reason that, Cole, you wanted me to come was to talk about Hash Wednesday. And
yes.
I know you had some other guests on talking about Hash Wednesday, so hopefully your viewers know what Hash Wednesday was about, but maybe.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to tell us. Yeah, yeah. Cool. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask, when did you come to UIUC, and why did you come to UIUC?
Why did I go to Illinois?
Yeah, why'd you go to the University of Illinois?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. My mother went to the University of Illinois. My father went to the University of Illinois. My brother went to the University of Illinois. And my uncle was a professor at the University of Illinois for 40 plus years. Fred Gottheil, famous economics professor, brilliant man. So I grew up going to Champaign my whole life because I had family there. My first cousins lived there. And so in my mind, I was pretty much always wanting to go to Illinois. I love the sports, love Illinois basketball specifically. So that's what brought me there. And it was a long time ago, my friend. I started there in 1983, graduated high school in 82, graduated Champaign in 86. And in those years, got to experience some of the best years of my life. You know, they say college should be a great experience for you because the reality is you learn more outside of the classroom sometimes than in the classroom.
Yeah. And
just through experiences I had at Illinois, it just made me a better person today for sure. And just, it was a great experience. I had a great college experience.
So it sounds like you had family go there and stuff. Sorry if you mentioned this, what'd you study again?
I studied communications.
Okay, cool.
Studied communications. My first gig out of college was in public relations, where I set up media across the country for different groups. And then started a business doing investor relations, where I represented public companies. I've been a consultant, have been on my own for 29 years, long time. And a lot of that, again, I bring back to, I was a communications major, and it gave me still diverse access to a lot of different classes. I had a minor in public relations. Public relations wasn't even a minor. They allowed me to choose the courses I felt were relevant for my minor, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So good experience at Illinois.
That's pretty interesting.
A lot of fun.
That's pretty interesting. And the question of the hour, I'm going to throw kind of 3 at you, so forgive me, I can restate them, but from your perspective, I think the most easy and intriguing one that you almost started on a second ago. From your perspective, what is Hash Wednesday?
What is Hash Wednesday?
Yeah.
Well, Hash Wednesday when I was in college was the one day that you were able to smoke weed legally, in a sense, where the police, the campus police, professors, nobody cared for one day. And it was in the Quad. And the Quad is a big, beautiful, and you know, Cole, big, beautiful area of grass surrounded by gorgeous architectural buildings of all the colleges, all the classrooms. And in the middle is this Quad. And the Quad's a great place to lay out in the sun in the summertime, chill and whatever, and hang with your friends. But you can never smoke weed out there. You couldn't. But this day you could. And not only could you, but hundreds, thousands of students. And I'm sure educators, professors, and I'm sure many of the community of Urbana and Champaign, everybody came together for this one day where originally apparently it started as a protest, and there was many they were called hash bashes around the country. And this started at Champaign in 1977, and here it was in 85 when I remember it most. And it was just the biggest party day of the year. And it was insane because everyone appreciated it and no one frowned upon it. There weren't people walking around going, "What are you doing smoking weed?" Mind you, people were smoking weed everywhere, but they weren't doing it in public. And certainly not at college campuses. You couldn't.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience. One of the fondest memories I had in Champaign actually was Hash Wednesday, just from a pure fun. That's what college should be sometimes, not always serious.
Yeah.
But do your work, get the grades, but there's always time for balance. But great time.
It's so cool to hear about that, and I think it's so fitting that you are a part of the Cannabis Hall of Fame, considering that you trailblazed with you know what? Your participation in these.
It's interesting that you say that, but there's a lot of truth to that because that was a part of history. It's a part of cannabis history. It's a part of college, University of Illinois history.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I'm lucky because it took me a long time to find that shift. I always wanted to work in cannabis because I always agreed and believed in the medicinal benefits as well as the recreational benefits. I love them both.
Yeah.
And so for me, I always thought, wow, it'd be great to be in that industry. And now I'm in it, so I'm blessed. But I look at it as there were signs along the way that just led me to that place, to where I am in cannabis today, which allowed me to get access to now representing the Cannabis Hall of Fame and the relationships that's opened up to, where now I'm being introduced to the largest of largest MSOs, the CEOs. I met Boris Jordan last week from Cureleaf. It's been an eye-opener. But going back to Hash Wednesday, great experience. It actually ended up causing a pretty funny experience in my life because if you remember what I said, my uncle was a leading professor. Everybody knew my uncle, Professor Gottheil. And all of a sudden, unless you want to tell what happened, but the next day in the college newspaper, which is the Daily Illini, page 3 is an article about Hash Wednesday. And in that article, I had the pleasure of not only being interviewed for Hash Wednesday, but they chose out of the thousands of people that were there that day, my picture.
Yeah, which we're displaying it on screen right now.
But you have the digitized version now. You should be showing the digitized version.
Yeah,
Cole.
we'll have it on screen right now so people can see.
Oh, okay, cool.
But just I wanted to show it so you and I can see.
As you can see that picture of that young guy with his shirt unbuttoned, and it says about my name and says Tony Schor Jr., feeling the effects of marijuana.
If you want to look at it,
I know it. It's part of history. So I was featured in the Daily Illini, and all I could think about was my uncle, the professor, that he was going to be outraged. And he absolutely just had a gas with it and laughed about it. And
do you remember when this photo was taken? You're sitting here smiling.
You know what? I really do remember it. Now, I held on to that news article ever since then. We're talking 30 plus years now. I held on to that. I do remember it. I do remember taking the picture. It wasn't until just this week that I remember actually talking to a reporter about it, because the reporter, of course, was another college student who was a journalist major probably at the time and was the reporter. I never thought about him in my life since then. But when I knew you and I were going to talk about this, I went back and looked at the article and I noticed the reporter's name. And I thought, wow, I should reach out to this guy and see if he's even around. So I went to LinkedIn, found his name, looked him up, lives in Canada. He's works for KPMG, and it works in M&A, which is coincident that I'm in M&A, but it was funny. And I reached out to him and I said, I know this is really strange and out of left field, but you interviewed me on Hash Wednesday at Illinois. I was featured in it. here's a copy of the article. I would love to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be on a podcast, and I would love to share any stories that you might have remembered. And he had one to share if I can take a
Please.
moment.
Yeah. And I want to say we have no time limits today,
cool.
so we're taking as much time as we need.
Cool.
Yeah.
Then I can light this up again.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So first off, this reporter who's now, he's in business in Canada. He couldn't have been more happier to talk about that day because he said it was one of his fondest memories when he went to school. But it was the complete opposite of the reason why it was. Should I keep rolling? So what was cool was he said, like I started to say, it was a different fond memory. For me, it was I got high with my buddies. We did things like there was a 10-foot bong. I said, okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. There was crazy stuff going on there that day. I can give you a lot of details that are ingrained in my brain because you don't lose your memory because of this. You just remember all the good memories.
Exactly.
So it's perfect. He says to me that he came to Illinois. He grew up in Hinsdale, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Came to school, never drank, never smoked, never was around it. And he was actually an engineer major. But he was covering sports for the Daily Line. But they asked him to cover some event called the Hash Wednesday. He had no clue what it was about. I mean, he had no clue. And he shows up to this massive party of kids his age, and I'm talking thousands, not hundreds, of kids smoking weed in bongs and joints and bowls. Pipes were a big deal back then. Definitely big, fat, thick bowl. I mean, people still love it.
Yeah.
Still
I
love
do
the
too.
old school pipes. People do.
Yeah.
But this, as he tells me recently, he remembers that he was in shock. He couldn't believe it. And he said, though, what he also remembers, though, is everyone was so nice to him and saying, hey, you want some? Take a hit. He goes, he didn't partake because it wasn't his thing. But he says it was a great memory. And everybody he interviewed, he would ask him what school they were in at Champaign, what age they were in, and sometimes where they were from. Because when any good reporter, they have to have the background information so that when they do the story, they have that.
Right.
So mind you, this kid has never been exposed to anything like this before. So he gets these great stories and all these great pictures and gets all the names of each one. Like he got mine in that article.
Yeah.
And he goes back to his editor and he shows him the list in the article and he goes, Seth, he goes, do you know what this guy's name is? He goes, what? He goes, read his name. He goes, Jerry Garcia. It was Jerry Garcia. The editor goes, do you know who Jerry Garcia is? He goes, no. He goes, dude, that guy was messing with you. Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead.
Yeah, right.
He was messed up.
Right.
He was stoned, having a great time, and he probably realized that you had no clue.
Yeah.
And he was right. So it was kind of a funny memory of his that, Jerry Garcia, it's kind of a little funny story.
That's
but yeah,
hilarious.
Hash Wednesday was a trip. It was crazy. They had live bands that were just jamming out there. There was Hare Krishnas. I don't know if you guys know who Hare Krishnas were.
No.
So it's a group of religious people that go out and give out pamphlets, free pamphlets, and they're in white gowns, and it's a cult.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Sure.
And that they were out there. By the way, that was Hare Krishnas is a thing from the 60s, just so you know.
Yeah.
So if you go back and you look at the shit from the 60s, that was a big deal. And all the kids were like dressed as flower children, everyone wanted it. That's the thing. We miss the 60s. I know you guys way miss the 60s, but we just missed growing up really in the 60s to experience, the things that happened. So that was our day to sort of feel like we were hippies, we could just like be cool. And should I keep talking? I feel like I'm over.
No, dude,
I'm not
bro.
even giving you. This is your show, and I don't shut up.
This is what this is all about,
Very cool.
dude. Keep going. This is good for history.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So speaking of history, thank you for that segue.
Yeah.
And that is, we're going for a world record that day at Hash Wednesday for the most consumed Little King bears. Now, you guys probably have no clue who Little King is.
No.
These guys have no clue who Little Kings are. Little Kings was a very popular beer in the 80s.
Okay.
And it was, you would buy like, I want to say it was a 12 or an 18 pack. You wouldn't buy a 6-pack because they were mini bottles of beer.
Yeah.
And they were called Little Kings. It was just the brand. It was a very popular one.
Mm-hmm.
So Illinois decided on Hash Wednesday we were going for a world record, which we achieved that day, I believe.
Yeah.
You may have to go look it up. But we were going for that record.
So
lighter. Another memory that, stealing lighters is not my memory, is that...
Did it fall between your legs?
What's that?
Oh. Yep, there you go. So...
yeah, so we were going for Little Kings. And what this reporter reminded me of was, he goes, I remember kids were eating bowls and bowls and bowls of cereal, and they were using the Little King beer instead of milk in the cereal.
That's funny.
Because it was all, they were just fucking stoned and having
Right.
a good time. Hash Wednesday was a great memory. You know, nobody really cared that it was about anti weed or pro. It wasn't about that to us. I guess originally that's really what it was designed to us. It was just a great party day, big party day. But in retrospect, it was 100% us protesting the legalization of marijuana and why it should be legalized.
Right.
Because we were basically saying, hey, we're doing it today.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the University of Illinois said, here, this is your day to do Hash Wednesday. No,
Right.
the kids, the students, probably a lot of grad students, pushed for this day and continued that tradition year after year, you know, until I don't even know when it stopped, but it stopped, which is really unfortunate because it stopped probably just prior to the legalization of where we are today. So
yeah, I think it seems to have stopped around maybe 2005, 2006,
That
maybe,
makes
I don't
sense.
know, maybe it pushed a little bit further, but you mind if I try one of your joints and
Are
I'll
you kidding?
roll
That
up
was-
one for you? Cool. So thank you, man.
Wait, just so you know, because I don't want to get off track here, but Cole's trying to make me out to be the celebrity, but the cool thing is, few things. One, coming into this place today, he said, oh, are you here for the dispensary or the bakery? And I said, actually, I'm here for first the dispensary, then I'm going to go into the consumption lounge. I'm here for a podcast. I was like, oh, I saw somebody setting up. You know, what do you guys got going on? I said, oh, I have a podcast with this guy. His name's Cole. He's got a podcast called Chillinois Podcast. You know, he's like, oh, the Cole memo?
Yeah.
This is a true story.
He just said that in
He
there?
just said it. We'll pull him in here if you need to.
Wow.
I go, yeah, this is the dude. I go, you got to come in here and say hey to him. So that's the thing about you, Cole. And then when I met you, what I thought in my mind is, this guy's an influencer. He talks my language. I don't give a shit that he's could be my son as far as age, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Because what matters is how two people get along, you know, and how people relate to one another.
Yeah.
And like I said before I met you, I was appreciating your work because I dug your whole attitude, and I dug who you had as guests. You've had some pretty high profile people on.
Yep.
You've had some average day consumer on there who want to smoke. I don't know if that deer thing has happened yet, but I want to see the deer.
Yeah. That's going to happen.
Chilling with. I don't want to give away something.
No, it's okay.
Chilling with live deer, like
yeah. There was just
why?
like deer next to me while I was podcasting. We were smoking
It's
weed.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I like that you're willing to go out there and meet with people. I know you do a lot where you'll do it by Zoom and you'll do it that way, which is cool because you can't be everywhere all the time. But now I'm starting to see you at different places, and you know, and plus, you know, you're doing your podcast from cool places. Oh, I have another story to share.
Yeah.
History. You want to share some history?
Yeah.
Cole just recently did a show where he was in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
In this episode of The Cole Memo, I'm coming to you from the heart of our nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. While I will not be storming the Capitol in today's episode, I think that the conversation we're going to have today will take you by storm.
And which I love that whole vibe of that scene. But it brought back great memories for me.
Yeah.
Because I remember smoking, this is before it was legalized, smoking a joint literally across the street from the White House, going like this and smoking in the White House right there. Now, I would have used my phone to take a picture, but they didn't have phones with pictures when I was there.
So you had to take a mental picture.
So I had that mental picture
Yeah.
forever in my life. But because it was kind of like my own little minor protest to legalization of cannabis. It was saying, come on, DC, make cannabis legal.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah,
That's cool as fuck,
Washington's a great place to go if you haven't been. You really feel the power of these buildings that you could see it on TV a million times. You know, it's like the Grand Canyon. Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon?
No, I need to go.
You have to go to the Grand Canyon.
No, it's like literally, it's on my
Forget
list
the
next summer.
pictures, especially when you sit back and you maybe pop a few edibles before you go there.
Hell yeah.
Or whatever
Hell
you
yeah.
like to partake.
Right.
Because it's a little hard to find, because there's so many people around, it's sometimes hard to consume like flower.
Mhm.
Of course, there's people like me who
just do
quick
it.
one hit, one eat to chill them, and I'm good.
Right.
For that moment.
Uh-huh.
And but I'm telling you, Grand Canyon is something that you can see pictures for 1,000 times. You can see on TV. It doesn't do anything until you're there.
Yeah.
It's sort of like Hash Wednesday. Unless
yeah.
you were there, it's like.
Well, and one of the things you were saying that with Hash Wednesday, the picture of the guy hitting the huge bong, you said you were
Not just any guy. My best friend.
Oh.
Turns out, when I reached out to some of my buddies and I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast about Hash Wednesday. If anybody happens to have any photographs, send them in. So 3 different people sent me pictures, which I've subsequently sent to you.
Yep.
And one of them is a picture of my buddy Rick Aronson, where he is standing atop of another friend of his.
I just realized that. I thought he was on a
Smoking.
ladder. I didn't realize he was on of his
Smoking
shoulders.
a 10-foot bong, 10 feet, lighting it up. It was, and I'll be honest with you, I've seen a lot of things in cannabis in my time. I don't think I have seen that since. You know, like in our day, it was beer bongs. You know, that was a big deal, beer bongs.
Yeah.
But this was a 10-foot bong. So that was out there on Hash Wednesday. Yeah, that's my best friend to this day, 30 plus years later. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
So many neat things that people were saying. In a way, we were protesting. It's funny. I'm wondering if we even had signs that were protesting, and we might have protesting cannabis. I think you might see some in some of those photos.
Yeah, I feel like definitely in some of the 80s ones that I
which is
found.
by the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
if you think about it,
you'll see some weed leaf ones. What were you saying?
No, we were definitely protesting, I guess. You know, I just don't remember saying, you know, peace now, freedom now. It wasn't quite like that.
Right.
It was more like a silent and a having a good time protest.
I would say
That's
civil
all.
disobedience. You weren't chanting.
Correct. No chanting.
Right? You guys were just chilling. You're like, you're doing what we're doing now. And that's actually, you remember I told you I had something to tell you that I was saving to tell you on the podcast?
You did say that.
That's basically it.
Lighter action?
It's that, lighter. Where did I put it? We're just losing lighters today. They need to have
Found
lighters
it.
around
here.
here.
Wait, watch. Okay, go.
Anyways, that's funny. But so back in the day, you were consuming like it's normal, and here we are. Didn't I?
Oh, that I was consuming then, and I'm consuming now.
Well, you were doing this protest
Right.
before it was ever even legal, and here we are today, and it's legal, and we're doing
We're
it
in
just
public
normal,
place.
like you were, like you didn't even realize, but that's what you were fighting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is just really a cool point and so true. You know, I mean, I remember the first time I smoked, I was 13. I remember because I was high from my 8th grade constitution test. Going back to history again. That's how I always gauge, like, how do I remember when I first smoking?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had been consuming for a long time. But, you know, it goes to show you can be an achiever and a believer.
Yeah.
Smoking weed.
So
if you just do things right.
I'm curious, just to take a minor step back.
Sure, please.
When and how did you hear about Hash Wednesday? That's like, did you come to school knowing about it?
No.
How'd
You
you
know
hear
what? I
about it?
wish I remember that. I don't know how I heard about it. And
Did you just end up there and you're like, oh, it's cool to smoke here?
you know what? It was definitely not like that. It was my fraternity loved to get high. We were
Okay.
definitely one of the stoner fraternities, and
Uh-huh.
you know, we like to get high. So I think it was just one of those you know what? They put posters up. That was a big thing back out there. You know.
Yep,
Now
and I've
you
got
only
copies of the posters
You would
as
have
well.
like little flyers.
Yep.
You know, that was the only way to market. You didn't have the internet. You did not have emails. You didn't have cell phones to text everybody. You didn't have ways to tell everyone, hey, be here at this time, unless you had a flyer hanging out at the different dorms and the different places around town. So that's how you came to learn about it. And then, of course, word of mouth was rapid.
Yeah. I've got some invites that I can show you, maybe even some posters you might recognize.
Very cool.
Yeah, you just about lit the wrong end. That's hilarious.
Wouldn't have been the first time.
I've done that before. You've pretty much described the atmosphere and vibe of Hash Wednesday, which was going to be my next question. I feel like through setting this all up, you have, but would you like to mention any other things that just should be noted about, like, help people because they might be in their office right now trying to distract themselves for work, or they're going through traffic or whatever. So take us back to Hash Wednesday if you could. I mean, you did a really good job of painting it, I want to just say, but like, yeah, what did you feel like we're here right now? You know?
There's a concept of Xanadu, right? And Xanadu is like you're in your perfect place, all right? And for me, at that time, where it was a gorgeous weather day, it was beautiful. It was April, and it was beautiful, sunny and hot.
Yeah.
And I know that from looking at the picture because my shirt was unbuttoned. I was wearing shorts. I think some people were in jackets and gloves, but that's different. They were on the other side, in the shade, probably.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day, truly. I really remember that. So, like, everything had the right vibe to it in that way. And I remember a lot of music and bands. And I remember one of my fraternity brothers sitting in on a group of guys that were playing like bongo drums and so forth. And he literally sat down with them, and they like passed over a drum, and it was like he was just playing and he was having a good time.
Yeah.
And it was just like that. But again, I don't want you to think it was like, 100 people, a few hundred people. These were thousands of people that were there that day. So that was a big deal at the time. So it was just, the atmosphere was, we should be able to smoke weed wherever we want. We're not hurting anybody. We're not screaming. There's no fights. That's the other thing. There was never fights. You didn't see people pushing each other to get to the next spot.
Yeah.
It was just whatever.
Were there ever any issues at all, like during your time at Hash Wednesday?
Not any that I remember. I mean, maybe a few kids passed out. It would have been the only problem I would have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, they were too high, couldn't handle it, probably sleeping.
Arrests?
There was no arrests in my time. The arrests started, I heard, like 4 years after me or so. They started to try to break it up a bit. So, it was sort of sparingly. I mean, I think of like Lollapalooza, there's not as many arrests as there should be for what goes on there. If you've ever been to have you ever been to Lollapalooza? Oh,
no.
You got to go to Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
But it's a great place, great experience. The only negative is people tend to overdo it because it's young kids. It's usually under 18. So you have a lot of under 18-year-olds doing a lot of stuff too early, too fast. So they're getting so messed up that they're like passed out or throwing up all over the place. And I mean, this is all over Lollapalooza. But you don't get as many arrests because they sort of know what's happening. That's what happened with Hash Wednesday. Nobody was getting sick. Nobody was passing out. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
There were no fights. But I heard like 4 years later, they started to try to arrest a few people here and there for whatever reason.
Yeah. Interesting. And I'm curious to take us back to that photo again for a moment. You weren't like concerned about being put into a newspaper at that age, dude? I just feel like a lot of stoners back then would be like you said, they give a fake name, Jerry Garcia and stuff.
Totally. First
right?
off, if you guys haven't noticed, I love the camera.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So that started young. That's one thing. I was an actor wannabe when I was younger. We could talk about that sometime. I think we talked briefly about it earlier. An actor wannabe. But you know what? I didn't care at the time because remember, there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, where's this newspaper going? It's the college newspaper. I was thinking, if anything, people would be like, hey, I remember you. I saw you in the paper, I will tell you, nobody ever did. Nobody ever said, hey, I saw that thing on the paper. It was more of a, hey, did you guys see me in the paper?
Oh, nice. Okay.
I was really proud of it. I thought it was kind of cool. And, I remember my uncle, I was like, was he going to be worried? My family, they weren't concerned about it. So, and, years later, here I am. And a lot of my friends said to me, now that I got the digitized version and now that you're in the cannabis industry, you should almost post that in your LinkedIn profile somewhere to show that, look at the evolution. It's really what you wanted to talk to me about, the evolution. Here you were protesting it in a way in college, and all these years later, and boom, all of a sudden you're in the industry. You work in the industry, in the legal market, and it's kind of full circle, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I love where cannabis is today as far as an acceptance level. We have such a long way to go, but now it's the moms that are doing edibles. It's true story. I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, especially family, but my mother, love her, 87 years old. She gets together with a group of friends and they play a game called Mahjong.
Yeah.
You've heard of it. Okay. So they love playing it. Every week they all look forward to it. They get together at someone's house and they play Mahjong. And she said early on, they would, talk about this and talk about that. And one time somebody brought up cannabis. And they said, God, does anybody do cannabis? Nobody thinks it. Every single one of them did edibles, wants to get a hold of some. My mom, who, will have like a disposable vape once in a while. So she has. My point is 87 years old. This is true freaking story. It's more accepting now, and they grew up in, the 50s and the 40s, so it's kind of cool for them that they're all doing it, and it's accepted. And it's not, oh my God, we're doing something illegal.
Right.
It's very legal. Oh,
right.
Thank you.
No, you're all good.
We might want that.
Yeah, we may want that. No, but I just have to, I don't mean to dwell on this too much, but you were just so ahead of your time, and the photo thing just really sticks out to me, dude, because you not only did you give your real name, but you just like stood there with the, as they say, paraphernalia.
I was proud. I honestly was, because you know what? The more we talk about it, you know how the brain works. Memories start coming back to you.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about it, I'm thinking I remember why I was proud of it, because I was saying, this should be legal. There should be nothing wrong. And we are having the best time. And I remember thinking, like, I'm like representing, this, and I'm representing that. And it is funny because you think about repercussions. And I haven't thought about this until just now.
That's here's
a repercussion. I was actually, I don't know if I should admit this, but I was actually part of the Student Government Association back in Champaign.
Okay.
Why I was, because I interviewed to be part of a committee that was called the Assembly Hall Advisory Committee. Assembly Hall, you know what Assembly Hall is.
Yep.
Now called the State Farm Center.
Right.
And Assembly Hall, where I was one of 4 students who represented the 37,000 population of students, to come in each week and talk about Assembly Hall and how it should be used, and what kind of concert should come in there, and what kind of theater should come in there, and how do we get more students involved. And then it was fortunate I got to learn about it. Anyway, here I was, a member of the Student Government Association.
Yeah.
That could have been a detriment, and they could have thrown me off. They never did, though. Don't take it away from me.
That's so
good memory.
That's really cool. I'm glad you brought it up. And
Champagne was great for me. I was a bartender at Champagne, a bar called Cam's, and if anyone's ever been in Champagne, everyone knows Cam's. It's just
what's crazy about Cam's
bar.
now is that there's a dispensary right next to Cam's now.
Love it.
Isn't that cool? So, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I have some friends who've opened up some dispensaries in Champagne.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
If you ever want to talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cloud9, Cannabis. New Era has a location there.
Yep.
Some good places there. I wish they had dispensaries.
The New Era is actually the one I was talking about. It's right next to Cam's. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I've not been there yet.
Yeah. It's like you literally walk out of Cam's, boom,
so,
New Era.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So when I was in Champaign, there was one smoke shop.
Yeah.
And I remember going up the stairs to it all the time. And
was it called? Can I guess? Was it called Undercover?
What was it called?
Was it called Undercover?
It wasn't.
I
think Undercover, but I think it's the exact same location.
Okay.
because if you're thinking of a place that you have to go upstairs and then it took over that spot. I forgot what it was called. It wasn't called that. God, I wish I could remember what it's called right now. But that was our place where we got all our pipes and rolling papers and bongs. But then it was you had to figure out how to get weed.
Yeah.
Just hopefully you have friends.
Right.
So, fortunate friends.
Quick question about that.
Please.
Did you were you allowed to call it a bong, or did you, like, when I was growing up and like finally turned 18, and again the weed part was still the part that was hard, but I could go into like a head shop but you had to call it a water pipe. You couldn't call it a bong. And if
you had to call it when you went into the place?
Yeah, like if you were like
the culture?
Yeah. If you were like, I want that bong, they'd be like, that's a water pipe. And they'd kind of warn you.
Here, I'll tell you why. It's interesting. Well, some smoke shops, or whatever you want to, some smoke shops are trying to deter you from either wanting to consume cannabis.
Yeah.
Or they're saying, I don't even know if you're legal to buy cannabis. I can sell you this either way, but we don't want this because we want you to know that this is to be used for either tobacco products, which to me is more harmful than cannabis, if you want to know the truth.
Sure.
And, but yeah, we know it was always bongs. Yeah, we never called it vapor.
But you weren't like, I guess my question is, you weren't like being facetious about the fact of what you planned. Like it was right. No, it was accepting in that place at a college campus because it was the only place that had that. And, it wasn't like, it was as years went on when there were multiple smoke shops and places grew and it was different. No, you were able to say bong and cool.
Paper bong.
That's cool.
Yeah,
and just my final note on the picture thing, because like even growing up before, so like I say, before it was even legal here, for example, because I had traveled to Colorado for a few years before it was legal here because I was of age, and I was like, that's pretty cool that I could just drive across a line somewhere.
It's closer than Amsterdam.
Yeah, at the time,
It's closer than Amsterdam.
Then now, of course, we've got Michigan, but but it was the closest place at the time, to your point. So yeah, closer than Amsterdam. I didn't have to freaking fly, and I could drive back. I just had to be careful. But anyways, right?
Right.
So the thing about it that I found interesting was that even though I went there and consumed legally, I would not post a picture on my social media, even if it was in a legal state. Now, some people would because they just don't care or whatever, but at that point in my life, even though it was legal, it's like I'm still trying to build professional and it's so for you in your youth, that's why I have dwelled on this. Like you were just like, this is what I believe is right, and you're like, yeah, take a picture.
Again, there was no internet.
Right.
And so that's a big difference. I wonder, I was saying earlier, all my friends are saying I should post that article and that story to sort of show the history of what you've done in cannabis. And I have it in my mind like you, but I'm still a professional in the industry. So am I giving myself my own sort of stigma and to my own? That doesn't make sense.
Right,
if I'm like, screw you, everyone we should smoke it. Right?
Yeah.
And it is legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just an interest. That's why it struck me. So if you were wondering why I was
like way ahead of the next person, right? It's not just so obvious. Nothing's obvious with you, is it, Cole?
I like to have a few tricks up my sleeve, but today is so straightforward. Like I said, what do you think the impact? Do you think there was an impact for with regard to Hash Wednesday on the campus culture, but like the culture, like how far? Yeah, if you could answer that question.
The way I would say it has an impact is those college students today are some of the CEOs of MSOs here in Chicago. They got into the industry. They didn't maybe get into the industry because they were at Hash Wednesday, but they had an inherent belief system that it was okay. So I think that being part of that history and still being through it today, and fortunately being in a time where it's now legal, which is a fantastic time to be in.
Yeah. Do you know CEOs that went to Champaign or Hash Wednesday? And I only ask that because there's a lot of synchronicity in Champaign, and I could name a few off the top of my head if you're curious, but I just wanted to ask you since you had mentioned that.
Yeah. I'll just say that there's people that I know in the cannabis industry that work for these large single state operators that I went to school with, or there's connections. And you know what? The whole thing is that you have to believe in something, not because someone tells you to believe it. Yeah. It's like quitting something. You're not going to quit smoking. You're not quit drinking. You're not going to quit eating. Whatever your vice might be, you're not because someone tells you it's wrong or right. You have to want to do it. So it's the same for wanting to partake. You have to want to do it. So I just think that it's a great time where there isn't as much of a stigma anymore. There really isn't. Where I can sit and talk at a table anywhere about it, and it's accepting. It's actually accepting for me to pull out. How many times I've done this? Take out my little vape, take a hit at the table, and somebody across the table who, another couple, whoever I'm with, says, hey, can I take a hit of that? And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you would. Yeah. So it's all accepting. And I think we're in a good time for that. I think there's still a lot of room for growth in that as well. There's a lot of skepticism still out there. But I think we're in a good time. I think it's a great culture because more and more consumption lounges like this one, which is OK Cannabis, it's called, in Wheeling, which is incredible and beautiful. You can come in here and hang with people where you may not want to smoke at home. Some people don't want to. Here's an interesting thing about me. I never smoked weed in any house, apartment since college, ever. When I lived alone, when I lived with my kids, when I got divorced and I lived my own, I never smoked in the house. So consumption lounges give you that place to smoke. Now, I always step outside in my garage or step outside, but whatever. But that's what's cool about consumption lounges.
Dude, yeah.
And that it's the way it should be. You should be able to just go and hang, just like you would go and hang at a bar and watch there's great large screen TVs here, to put on football games if you want to sit. Instead of drinking, you can consume.
But I like that you can drink as well, because I personally like to have maybe a drink or two, and you can
walk next door. Now, I'm not sure if you can bring it in here, the alcohol. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure
to
either.
check on
maybe
that.
it's on the rules.
But there is a bar here at OK Cannabis.
So yeah, Tony was correct. I'm displaying the rules right now, and they seem pretty strict about the alcohol and cannabis consumption. It says any guest observed consuming alcohol at the bar will not be allowed to partake in cannabis. Further, it looks like only cannabis purchased the same day at OK may be consumed in the lounge. I brought my own homegrown. So just want to say that those two rules are pretty fucking lame. I mean, I get the spirit of the don't bring your own cannabis, because you can't really bring your own beer to a bar, but man, that's such a fucking lame rule. Both those rules are super lame. But my point in bringing this up wasn't to tell you my opinion. It was to kind of just provide some facts behind what we were just discussing. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Just gorgeous, and a restaurant and a beautiful bakery. I mean, they have several locations. This is a commercial for. It's just a great place. They're
the background. They can take it. Scott is really cool.
Scott's such a great guy.
He came on the podcast.
Scott Weiner. He's a solid restaurateur.
He took some tough questions from the Chillinois podcast, and he handled them well, and then he invites us like this. That's why you respect somebody like that.
He was so excited that you were coming here today.
He's super cool. And I texted him in the past about doing a podcast, he was open. At the time, we didn't have it. It's the stars aligned with this one, my friend.
I'm so glad I stopped you that day on the street.
I am
front of
too,
Benzine.
man.
I mean, it was a no-brainer for me because, here's a little more for your ego. I'm not a celebrity seeker or like an athlete, take a picture with me kind of guy. But if I ever see a celebrity, or specifically actors and actresses, because I love theater, or if I see an athlete or somebody I really like, I will take the time and I'll ask if I could take a picture. Now, we didn't take a picture that day, but I stopped because I wanted to appreciate you for what you do. Yeah. And you'd be a good guy to know.
Yeah. Cool.
And to have a joint with, or three today. You know, that's always
three,
good.
Maybe
could
five.
Be good people.
We'll see. I said 3, maybe 5. We'll see.
Right.
No, thank you again. Thank you again. And I'm curious, just a little bit more to that last question. And I actually hadn't asked. I've only interviewed one participant so far. I've got a few more participants. You're my second participant so far in Hash Wednesday.
And they always say save the best for second, right?
Yeah, they're all from I think the next 2 will be from your time period as well. So cool. I can say one of the person's name's Joshua Salone. I don't know if you knew him.
Sloan.
I can maybe show pictures later. Yeah. Maybe he wasn't. I think it was actually 1983. So
interesting.
Yeah, but anyways,
cool.
I wanted to ask, just kind of in the spirit of my last question, which it was kind of about the impact. And I didn't ask the last participant this question. It just kind of came up. Do you think people forgot about Hash Wednesday?
It's a great question. Every time I brought it up to them about this podcast, or I've shown them that article, they all immediately say, "Oh my God, that's one of my favorite memories of college."
I mean the culture, though. You know what I mean? Because I feel like people know about the hash bashes. They think like Michigan and like California and stuff like that. But do you think like people forgot about
same following and memory? And
do you think like the cannabis, like it's a little section on a Wikipedia page somewhere? I don't know. Because when I Google it, I only find the NewsGazette articles or little this or that, from WCIA, which are local publications. But I'm wondering if the broader community at large forgot about Hash Wednesday.
I hope not. I mean, it's a great question, Cole. I think that the people that were there will always remember it.
Sure.
In some people's mind, they haven't thought about it ever. I bet when it comes to 420, and for me, it's every day when it hits 420. But I'm talking about like the April 20th.
Sure.
People think about it.
Yeah.
And they're, God, that was a great time. I hope so. And I hope that maybe even through this podcast that we're doing, that people will realize the magnitude of what it meant to the culture, to the future of cannabis, from a protest in a very positive manner, in a loving manner, and a hell of a good time way. And, that it does lend to, we're in a bad time when there's a lot of stuff going on bad in the world, and there's a lot of protests that are going on in the world, and there are ways to protest peacefully. There just are.
Yeah, and you guys that was civil disobedience at its finest, like I said. And so I realize that that's a tough question, and I wonder, though, really where I was coming from with that question. And it's hard for you to answer because you don't know what you don't know, but and how would you know? But I'm so glad you brought that story up earlier, because it actually does kind of answer my question now that I think about it. The story about the journalist you connected with, as he said, he didn't consume, but it was impressed upon him that it wasn't really it wasn't that crazy. No, it didn't seem like it was that crazy, and that's cool to hear. Like, that's kind of what that question's based in. Like, how were other people impacted that weren't?
Yeah, well, he was a perfect person to ask, and he said he does remember how everyone was so nice and caring and friendly and offering anybody, and it didn't matter if you were a stranger. Mm-hmm. And again, that goes back to where cannabis is today. From certainly, I know in the cannabis business community, Cole and I have, we've been around the cannabis business community. It's a great culture of people. It's bringing business, Wall Street, culture, diversity, all now in one industry that's still so new, has so much growth potential. Mm-hmm. It's exciting. It really is. And to be a part of, I never, until you and I really talked about it, I never thought about me being part of history. But
you are.
Being in Hash Wednesday and having the newspaper to back it up, is being part of history. It's exciting. It's cool. I love being part of history.
Yeah. And, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'll definitely share it with you. I'm creating a document, and where it starts is in 1979 with the Cannabis Control Act. But now I'm going to be able to add, because there's just not a lot of cannabis history before, to a certain point, recorded major milestones in Illinois cannabis history. But because I'm recovering these stories, I will be adding to that and being able to share these newspaper clippings, and it's really just going to be something special. I'll be giving you a free copy of it.
I bet. That'll be cool.
But
see, now you're making history.
Yeah, I'm trying to collaborate.
I feel like that it's so important.
Yeah.
And, and it comes from a perspective that's not for a brand other than his own. It's not to promote this brand or that brand, and it's not to, hey, cannabis is great, everyone should do it. It's,
and
just
the way
get to know it,
yeah,
understand and appreciate it, and certainly appreciate that you have the freedoms today that it's legal to consume. It's the best.
Yeah, and the way I'm approaching this, not to put too much time into this, we'll get back to Hash Wednesday in a second, but I've actually been releasing the document completely for free for folks. So if you don't even want to listen to my podcast, you can just download the document and listen to it. But what's cool about the document is it has citations for everything you read in the document, right? And so the first version of the document, which is public, it's episode 232 of the Chillinois podcast. So if you'd like to check that out, go back to episode 232 of the Chillinois podcast. You can still find it at chillinois.net. There's a document that you can download for free, and you can listen to a podcast where we go through that document, so you can kind of listen along. We add a little bit to it. We watch some videos, which, are included in the citations. If you look up anything, again, there's citations for everything we put in that document, because we got to give credit where credit is due to the journalists that put in that hard work, right?
It's all about credibility.
Yeah. So
and integrity and doing it the right way. And Cole, you do it the right way.
Thanks, man.
And no, it's true. And it's so cool. The only thing is you send so many teasers out that I can't stop, because I always want to see what the rest of that episode looks like. It's like, well, you got to wait 2 weeks, or, sign up here. And it's great, but it's like, you're doing a great thing, Cole.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because some people have asked me about that, and again, we'll get back to Hash Wednesday, but thank you for letting me. I always love the opportunity to take on that, like that, because I will release everything for on my Patreon first, right? And so if you follow us on Patreon, I'm just putting them out like that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of podcasts coming out, but I will release the podcast publicly, at a later date, like you say. So for example, that Jordan Davidson one that you referenced in Washington, D.C., it's on Patreon now. And I'm actually going to release it publicly next week. So I'm going to have shorter release schedules to address that, because I've heard it before.
Interesting.
But the other thing I wanted to just say for folks, because I really am glad to take on this, like it just, like, with travel and this equipment, which, as you can see, it's not crazy fancy right now, but my time and everything else, it costs a lot. So folks, my selfish plug, if you're able to support me, that's what the Patreon's for. You get instant access to all my content, but you also support me, which helps me to continue doing all this. It's thecolememo.com/Patreon. That's why I do it that way, though. It's just because, like, I always release it all for free ultimately, but I wanted to give people the opportunity to support me, and frankly, I need the support in many ways, because the gas. I mean, I just went to Nevada and then Chicago, then Carbondale. I'll tell you off air, I have 2 cannabis CEOs that I've driven to Chicago to, and they've had emergencies come up, so we've had to reschedule. So I've driven to Chicago twice, only to have to go back.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the future, I'll always have people for you to talk to in Illinois cannabis.
Okay. Yeah.
Anywhere you want to be, I think I have.
Yeah, no, we had talked about this. We definitely have to get connected, but we'll talk about that off air. But just to get back to Hash Wednesday, you've kind of answered it, and it's kind of already there. I feel like I said it myself, but if you have anything to add, could you share any insights into how Hash Wednesday may have influenced your personal or academic life? I actually said academic life. I meant to say your personal or professional life going forward, like after you left UIUC. And I feel like we've kind of already really answered that, but how did Hash Wednesday stay with you? And
well, it stayed with me definitely with that article of history that I kept carried with me through the years. And whenever Hash Wednesday would come up, I would show people that article. So it definitely stayed with me. Because I've always enjoyed cannabis through the years, it certainly stayed with me in my memories and in my, it sounds dramatic, but in my heart and all that. But it's definitely was a part of me. And, looking back at it, really, since you and I started speaking about it, gave me the opportunity to sit back and pause and realize the importance of it as part of history and the protest of what it was. Because, I guess even I am taking it almost granted today that we're in a legalized world. I never thought, like I said earlier, I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. So it's amazing that we're all living in that time now. It should be accepting. It should be welcomed. It should be a fantastic way for people of all cultures and diversity to come together to make money in an industry that's in its infancy stage. Mm-hmm. It's cool. So did it have an impact on me? I think it must have, because I love always telling stories. I was fortunate to tell that story about Hash Wednesday through that paper article. I've told it since I've gotten into cannabis industry many times. So I guess it definitely has had an impact on me.
Yeah.
Has it had an impact on the world? How it might have walked away? I don't know. For some people, it might have been just a great freaking day to party, and it's a great memory, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah, and so I want to roll up a joint to close this one out. I feel like these are some good big picture, just a good big picture thing to close out that I asked the first participant, and I did this came up with my interview during the first participant. It's a question that I honestly have been asking in the Chillinois podcast a lot, but it's something I continue to plan to ask a lot on the Cole Memo as well. It's like,
will you be my sidekick? Will you do the show with me going forward? Sure, Cole. I will go with you, and I will sit in that car. We will drive to Nevada together. You need a partner. I'm here for you. No,
well,
I know that wasn't what you were going
No, but so that's hilarious. Yes, like we'll have to make something like that happen.
Hell yeah.
But what I was going to ask is, like, when you were there, and so this is going to be a conversation about, okay, it's legal now, but I like to talk about what I feel are the shortcomings of legalization, right? So one of the jokes that I made to just make this kind of lighthearted, like, people during Hash Wednesday were like, all right, guys, let's legalize this stuff, but you should only be able to have an ounce. And you can't smoke in public places. You can only smoke in lounges, right?
Baby
and you
steps.
Can't grow on it.
Baby steps, Cole.
I know.
Listen, I agree. You open the floodgates, right? Let everybody do what they want to do. First off, everybody should have. The one thing I've learned in life is you can control only two things, and that is what goes in your mouth and what comes out of your mouth. Those are the only things you can control. So when it comes to cannabis, if you choose to consume, you should have that right to consume. If you're not impeding on anybody or whatever, you should be able to consume. If you want to grow it because you want to consume it, you should be able to do that. That's just the reality of it.
But why do you think that we didn't go all the way? You know what I mean? You said baby steps. Like, what?
But why aren't we at the bigger steps today, right now? And
yeah, and I know part of it is the Cole Memo, literally, because they don't want, like, part of the policy that I'm referring to is, they don't want diversion, and some people will argue that if you just go full-fledged, like I'm talking, then product is gonna leak out of the state. So I'll just, lead with that. But, like, why do you think, because I'm going to be
asking me my feelings.
Yeah, I wanted to ask
you. Federal regulation, and is it important? And do you want to see cross branding in states? You want to talk about that, or is that for another podcast?
Well, no, we can, but I want to. I just
good.
want to. I think it's interesting that I mentioned the Cannabis Control Act of 1979, which came into law shortly before sounds like you were at the U of I.
Yeah.
It's still largely in effect today. Like, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act only made it so that 30 grams or less for in-staters like you and I. The crazy thing is, out-of-staters, it's 15 or less. And if you get caught with more than that, it's not like it's just like, hey, it's a criminal offense or a citable offense. But most cases, what I understand to be a criminal offense. And I guess that's really the heart of my question. It seems weird to me that, yes, I understand baby steps, but it just seems so crazy to me that the enforcement mechanism for cannabis is the criminal law. It's not like, if I've heard of people coming back from like Indiana or whatever with a bunch of cigarettes because they get it at a lower tax rate. And yeah, you can get in trouble for that. But it's like a tax issue. It's not you're going to jail because you have all these cigarettes in the back of your car issue.
Right.
You know what Do you get where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, but the question, I don't know if there's a lot of things you're saying, because crossing state lines is different than having
I want to take that out of the equation. Sorry.
Okay.
But let's just pretend, in state.
You should be able to travel with as much as you want and consume when you want and where you want.
And purchase as much as you want,
Completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you. I mean, and it's strange because when you go visit other states, you're like, oh, I'll just buy as much of this and that, and because they don't know. And well, actually, no, because if you're buying from dispensaries and your ID is there, they know in Nevada, as an example, that you bought X at this dispensary already. And so you can't just outbeat the system, So, yeah, I don't think there should be regulations on how much one could buy. Just like you can buy 5 kegs, you can buy 12 cartons of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And you can drink that alcohol and get behind the wheel of the car and all those horrific things. I mean, but it's going to take time to get there from that side. It seems that, again, more and more people's past time that they spent in jail is being expunged more and more from criminal, that's a good thing, from cannabis crime that they committed that shouldn't have been a crime, that they did time that they shouldn't have done time. There's way too many people that have gone through that, but that's starting to expunge. So I think all the laws will soften. I will tell you this, the police are softening a lot about it. Perfect example, going back to Benzinga, not even this year, but last year, I get one of Cole's specials.
Yes.
Oh, I feel like I am
some home cultivated
only
by
I have
myself.
Something to like. Just kidding.
Home cultivated by myself as well. So
I heard about that. You talked about that before on your podcast. I meant to ask you about that.
Yeah. So here's your experience.
Is yours in a tent?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
My nephew.
It's really actually a cool setup. It's like connected to the internet and such. We're in the future, but yeah.
Lovely.
Sorry, I feel like I cut you off by giving you that joint. You were saying something. We were talking about shortcomings and getting there, and
well, I mean, I always say it doesn't. You want this bag?
No, it's yours.
Amazing.
It's yours, bro.
I'm not even just saying that.
Yeah.
That is sweet.
Yes, it's good stuff. Homegrown is where it's at.
That is solid. All right, so I would say to you that I hope those types of regulations free up just like you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not always what we want. It's just the laws are the laws, and you just got to work within them. It's like the whole regulatory. We work in a regulatory industry with cannabis. Some people would say you should have as many dispensaries as you want. You shouldn't be limited, So there's different viewpoints to that.
Sure.
But then you have a supply-demand issue. So then
and I was going to ask you
economics.
A little bit about that. I know that's a big topic and such, but I did want to. That's I think the topic that I'd like to close on. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and I just hope that somebody. The reason I talk about this is because I hope that somebody, a legislator or even the community, can put pressure on their legislators to attain what I would call actual legalization of cannabis. Like all these shortcomings, whenever you're presented with them, or we are presented with them rather, I think, but I thought it was legal. That's the thought that always comes up in my head. So when they say, Cole, you can only buy this much, but I thought it was legal. Cole, you can't smoke it out here, but I thought it was legal. Cole, you can't grow it unless you have a card, but I thought it was legal. Like it.
Wait,
that's.
Did you think it was legal?
When somebody says cannabis is legal,
in
you
Illinois,
then assume
I can smoke anywhere. It's legal.
Yeah, you think, and I can have as much as I want, and I can grow it. And you think, when you think legal,
Right.
you think like beer.
It should be.
And that's not what
I
it is.
agree with you, Cole. It really should be. Again, it goes back to you're just consuming it for you.
Yeah.
And and so you should be able to choose what you want to do when you consume. And
I will say our home grow laws are strong when you have the medical card.
What's that?
I am happy with our medical home grow laws.
Yeah.
They're pretty decent. Like, we could use a higher plant count, definitely. But as far as all of it goes, what's cool about home grow in Illinois is you are allowed to keep all amounts that you cultivate exceeding 30 grams as long as you secure them within the home. I'm like kind of loosely quoting off the top of my head the law. What that means is if you have a medical card and you grow at home,
Which I do.
Yeah, you have no possession limit at home. That's legalization, my friend.
Well, that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. Yeah, exactly.
That's the way it should
so
be.
I wanted to give credit where credit is due on our law.
Interesting, yeah.
Because, you know.
Listen, Illinois has done great things in cannabis as a state.
Yeah.
I hope you understand that. What Pritzker did in having really the first state to legalize it without requiring it to go through the processes, by him making it legal, that's a big deal. That opened up a legalization.
Yeah. I'll give credit on that in the sense that it's kind of funny. It goes back to the question I was asking you about the picture. The reason I started this podcast is because that law came into effect. Otherwise, I would, even though I had my card, I would not have started my podcast because it still was not, even though I could buy it legally and consume it legally, technically at that point, it was not accepted enough to where I wanted to start this podcast and say, hey, I'm Cole. By the way, I'm smoking because I have my medical card. I just felt like it was too much of a leap. And then to credit to what you're saying is when legalization happened in 2019, that's when I started the show.
Well, what's interesting is you had a medical card, you went to a dispensary to buy, or you were able to grow at home legally, and you didn't want to do the podcast because why? There was nothing illegal of what you were doing. Why were you holding yourself back from giving exposure to the normalcy of cannabis, which is one of the things I like so much about you, Cole, is there's people out there who don't realize how normal cannabis is. It's not a bad thing if you haven't tried it or if you haven't done it. So you normalize it now because it's legal, but you wouldn't normalize it when it wasn't legal. Maybe it wasn't legal for everyone.
That's the thing.
And that's good.
No, but you're pointing out a good thing that that I've actually been trying to work on because I've been trying to lead by example. So to your point, sometimes I would keep it back from my family that I talk about what I talk about and stuff. But now it's like, I talk to my grandma and I'm like, yeah, I just interviewed Tommy Chong the other day. And she's like, great. Tommy Chong? And it's like, yeah, we smoked weed together.
He's in the Cannabis Hall of Fame, by the way. He's an inductee.
Very cool. Yeah. But in the past, I may not have said that. So I've been trying to lead by example. And in fact, I've had professors decline me and sometimes accept me on this pitch that I make, which is like, look, we have to lead by example and we have to be honest about our drug usage and what we think about these substances. And if you do that, you will inspire other professionals to then come out and be like you did in the 80s. That's the thing. To answer your question, it's just the stigma. There was still a very big stigma even when I had my medical card, because here's the thing. I say I have my medical card and this is how stigmatized it was. People would be like, oh, for what?
Right.
It's like, that's
it's
such
an assumption.
Yeah, an
that
assumption
you really didn't have the medicinal need that you might have had. I hope you had, or now, do I hope you had? No.
Yeah, no, but you get. I get what you're trying to say.
Right. No, that's. I know when I got my medical card, the first question was, "Oh, can you pick up something for me at the dispensary?" And I'm like, "I can't."
Yeah.
But literally, that's what happened because, there is a lot of people that consume.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think we're in a good time. I think that as far as regulations go, from a legal standpoint of how much you can own and how much you can grow, those will soften up as time goes on.
Yeah. And that's why I bring it up to inspire people to keep that conversation going. And to close, it's something that you brought up that I always talk about and I wanted to discuss, license limitations, and that's, like you say, there are a few ways that manifests itself. I actually don't know that I have an issue with the license limitations you were talking about, but I could be swayed. I have been swayed in the past, but for the most part, I'm okay with per ownership license limitations because the idea behind them sounds nice. Of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but the idea is like, it's the idea that no one person's going to get bigger than anybody else by having per ownership limitations. But I think one of the biggest things, so that's something that I don't necessarily have an issue with that we have in Illinois and that exists, as you said, in other states. But I do have an issue with, like, I hate that we've capped the number of licenses that have been issued. And the governor even addressed this at Benzinga. And he says, look, he said this a few times now at this point. But he says, look, I know that people say that we should have just issued a bunch of licenses. But the truth is, we were very meticulous. I'm very loosely quoting him. We purposefully limited the licenses so that when people got into the business, they could do so in a profitable way. And I think in other cases, he said so they weren't edged out of the market, which is what you see in other states. He's not wrong.
I happen to 100% agree with the governor.
Yeah.
So, just so you know,
yeah.
Again, this is from a business standpoint, an industry that I work in and I talk about every single day because I put these buyers and sellers together of dispensaries, licenses to open up a dispensary.
Yeah. Do you think I recapped what he was saying pretty accurately?
Very much so.
Yeah.
With that being said, is limited licenses per group. Let's start off with limited licenses available to a state.
Yes,
if you have too many of something, the value diminishes. So you want to have greater value. That's first thing. Governor Pritzker was right by saying that they wanted to do it. They want to make sure the logistics work. It's a lot of regulatory things. What's interesting about dispensary, people are concerned about bringing dispensaries into their neighborhood, but I would love to know about any other business that is open with cameras and security in every nook and cranny in a location 24 hours a day. And if ever a camera goes off, everything shuts down, the police come right away. There is nothing more secure than a dispensary is my point. But going back to the limits, this is with the social equity licenses and the opportunity to open up dispensaries. It's giving a more diverse opportunity, a chance to grow in an industry, to be successful and make money. So the limits per group, you think it should be unlimited for company X to have 25 dispensaries that they want?
No, I was saying like I actually am fine with the fact that we've got a 10 dispensary limit, 3 cultivation limit. That's fine. No, that's fine.
It's changing.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Stay tuned.
That's interesting to hear.
That's going to open up. They're going to get more. The
that makes sense,
are going to be able to have
because
access to more, but they're going to also allow some of the original ones to do more. So they're going to try to make it as fair as they can with the larger companies, the MSOs. And so go ahead, please continue what you were saying, though.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to say that, I totally get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. And people have said it. We've heard it from multiple different perspectives that when you limit the number of licenses, it gives the license an intrinsic value, is how some people describe it. In other words, there's only so many places to go. So you go to these places and they are able to, like you said, it's really trying to, would you agree, fight price compression? Right?
Find price impression?
No, fight
price impression.
To prevent price compression. Would you agree with that? Because that's what he just said.
We laughed about Michigan earlier. People drive to Michigan from Illinois.
Correct. I do.
Sometimes. Because the pricing is so cheap.
Yes.
It's so low. So as a consumer, it's wonderful.
Right.
It's great. It's great access. But as a business, it's harder to make dollars. It's harder to make money. So if it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint to have unlimited licenses.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. And unlimited brands within it.
Yeah.
Now, Illinois has, I think it's only like 70 brands now. I think it's very limited how many brands are in Illinois. A lot more are starting to come. We talked about earlier, the craft growers are starting to bring new stuff in Illinois. We'll see new brands. All that's important because you need product differentiation. But there's a lot of dispensaries that are now going to be opening up.
Yeah.
That came from these original licenses that were originally submitted and applied for. You're starting to see them almost every month open up.
Yeah.
Social dispensary just opened up in Park Ridge recently. Sparked just opened up another dispensary. They're starting to open up. So you're going to see a lot more dispensaries and more brands behind it. But unlimited stores for anybody who wants it is not good economically, not from a business standpoint.
But why do you think that, and I agree with you actually, because the fact I'm about to say backs up what you just said. So 80% of restaurants go out of business within the first 5 years. That's as a result of the fact that I would say that you can just get a fucking
Correct.
license and then you can't compete with, let's say, a West Town Bakery or something like that.
Right.
Just to, but anyways,
Yeah, I know.
you know, like so. But I guess what I'm asking is, how has that been justified? Like, I guess I understand what you're saying. Like, it makes perfect sense. Again, it increases the intrinsic value of the license. But I'm just saying, like, in America, it would seem like you wouldn't like prevent.
I hear what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
No, right.
And
anybody should start a business if they choose to start a business.
And the most scary thing, if I could just undertone that question, is it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The enforcement mechanism isn't like, Cole, you're selling a bunch of weed in this store without a license. Shame on you. You need to get a license. Here's like if you do a liquor serve liquor without a liquor license.
Right.
Like, you just get fines. If I did that with cannabis, I would be thrown in jail. That's when I relate it to Hash Wednesday and everything else, because as you just said, yeah, when you go to Michigan, it's much more consumer friendly. And I get that Illinois is much more business friendly. But I go back to legalization. I'm like, what did we legalize it for? Did we legalize it for? And I'm not saying we can't do both.
I know what you're saying.
I'm not saying we can't do both, but I do think it's like, why did we legalize it? You know? And
Why
it
is
wasn't
any business or industry started?
Yeah.
Demand.
Yep.
And to make money.
Yep.
Because if you don't have the demand, it doesn't matter what you produce.
Mm-hmm.
So the demand was a pent-up demand in cannabis for so long, a pent-up of new brands and legalizing it and affordability and accessibility. And now that that's all in play, that plays into that.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I just hope, I guess the reason I bring this up is because, like I say, if to close, I don't think anybody at Hash Wednesday imagined this when they thought of legalization. And I mean that in good ways, but I also mean that in bad ways. You know what I mean? Where it's like, they would never imagine we'd be sitting in a lounge in here. I just ate a sandwich earlier. It's so casual. People are buying weed. There's some folks smoking weed just like they never. Yeah, there's so many different apparatuses and games, board games. Like, it's they never would imagine this. But I also think like I say, not to make it too. I don't mean to make it too negative, but I also am trying to like. I'm hoping that somebody is looking back on this in history, maybe in 2040, and they're like, you couldn't grow weed then? And you couldn't, like, that's what I'm saying. I feel like we still have progress to make, you know?
Right. But
which I know that's a point you were making too.
But that's part of what we've been talking about the whole day is history.
Yep.
We're only one small part of history, you and I, Cole. And when this time goes on and goes forward, there's going to be more history and more growth and more stories to tell, and that will grow. And that's just the way life evolves, is through natural progression.
Yeah. And
so I think, again, the important thing is what Cole keeps saying is talk to your legislators, reach out to them, because if you just talk it amongst yourselves and your friends, nothing will get done. Mm-hmm. So if you have an opinion, that's why you voted for these people to be put in place, speak to them, reach out to them. They're accessible. Tell them your points. So that's an important thing. If any takeaway people should have is everybody should have a voice, whether it's through a newspaper article, a podcast, writing an email, or picking up the phone and leaving a message. You know, if you protest in the right way, you can get things done. And by doing such, the life in cannabis will continue to evolve, and we'll get to more of that Xanadu of Hash Wednesday.
Yeah, fuck yeah, hitting 10-foot bongs on the quad. Yeah, and so to your point, I think this is a good positive note to close on. You know, somebody said this on the podcast in the past. Do you know, so the difference in federal and state policy, what we're doing here with it being federally illegal but state legal, this is the biggest difference in federal and state policy since pop quiz what?
Federal and state policy
I'll give you a hint. The president that had to deal with this was from Illinois as well.
Was what?
He was from Illinois as well.
Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
The biggest difference in federal and state policy was slavery back then. And
Civil
to the
War
point,
action and the whole.
It's not like at the stroke of his pen that everything became legal, even though he said that's no longer happening. And even with the past fights of Martin Luther King and stuff, like they fought hard and they got a lot of things, but the fight still goes on. So maybe to your point, it is those baby steps. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like there was ever one day where all problems were solved. It takes people like us to, which, it should be. Ideally, it would be. But it takes people like us to have these conversations and hopefully inspire others to, like you say, write in and everything else to keep pushing that pendulum forward, you know?
By staying quiet or talking about it just among friends, although that's important, it's also important to do something proactive to make a change. Changes don't happen unless you take action on it. It just won't happen.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Tony, it's been a blast today. I think I'm going to use the restroom and smoke another joint. But before we stop the podcast today, I wanted to give you the space. Was there anything we didn't talk about today or anything you wanted to close on? Why don't you show the camera if they hadn't seen your University of Illinois hat?
Brought the Illini hat.
Yeah. Now, did you get that at your time, during your time there?
No, it just looks like it would be.
Gotcha.
But thanks for that. No. No, the only thing I would say is just everyone should just enjoy what cannabis, weed, dope, grass, pot, whatever you want to call it. Just enjoy it because there's so much bad in the world and there's good things that you can make out of the world, and you should enjoy yourself along the way. And if you enjoy cannabis or weed, you should do it because it's legal.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And there's a lot of growth still ahead from a stigma side, and actually even quality side we hope will get better and better because it is starting to get better, you know, and hopefully the strengths levels will be more allowed to get higher as they are in other states to allow that much greater quality of brands.
Yeah.
Specifically here in Illinois as an example. And that's going to start to come. It's starting to.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah. If I could put a cap on some of the things we talked about, like you say, Illinois, it's business friendly. I would say states like Michigan, Oklahoma, sometimes you could argue even Colorado. I know they've changed their market up a bit, but I would call that consumer friendly in the sense that it's so cheap to purchase the product. And I understand that makes it hard to make money off of it, but it's like, hey man, deal with it. You know, I'm just like, that's what I like. I sorry to keep going on this, but I talked to the guy from the lead regulator from Oregon, and he did say that, you know, while a lot of people went out of business and he wouldn't wish that on anybody because they had such an open license approach, he did like the fact that the people that did sign up knew what they were getting into and at least had the chance to participate, versus Illinois, where I think our cannabis czar, Toy Hutchinson, said like we had 4,995 applications for what was going to be 75 licenses. We knew 95% of people weren't going to get them. And it's just like,
let me tell you something, Cole.
That's the numbers.
There's good thing about that is safety and regulatory. Listen, first off, I believe in regulation. I believe that there should be regulatory control of certain things, okay? You can't have total anarchy and total do whatever you want, guys. Go ahead and hit somebody with a bat because you feel like it. No, there's got to be laws in place for everything. And, you know, and because this is still a drug, there has to be regulations in place. So some of that has to do with how much you can buy at that time and so forth. Just like there are laws in place when you go to a bar where you can't be overserved. Some people say, I should be able to drink as much as I want. You know, it's so there has to be that some regulation in place, right? So when it comes to access and to be able to get into a business, again, I think cannabis is welcoming of different business cultures, diverse cultures coming together is a great thing. And I know as a consumer, believe me, I know as a consumer, it's a lot cheaper to drive to Michigan and buy product. But on the business side, it's not, it's just a totally different way of looking at it. But I also will say that I don't drive to Michigan personally to buy it because it is so accessible. I mean, it is accessible. It's around the corner from where I live. I can buy weed from this time of the day to that time of the day. I can go and sit in a consumption lounge with friends, all those things. It's accessible.
Yeah.
What's great about it is that it's your choice. Make it your choice. And, just like nobody wants to tell you, you don't want to be told what to do or how to do it. Don't tell anybody else what they should do or how to do it.
Yeah.
Live your life for you. Be good to others, right?
Yeah.
Chill. Fucking light up a joint. If I had a lighter, I would light it up.
Did I steal it again?
Probably. You might.
Well,
we're all over the place.
It's funny. Oh, it's between your legs again. It's the theme of the podcast. This disappearing lighter. I just thought of this number off the top of my head. People Googled me on this. In 2022, Illinois sold $1.9 billion in cannabis. Michigan sold 2.3. Again, people use it as they say that like that's a failed market, and I'm just like, but if they're making more money.
Wait. Is that really what you think?
I'm curious
because when it comes to any kind of sales, there's a top line, a gross number, and then there's a net. It's sort of like when you make money and then you have to pay taxes. You might make $100,000 a year, but you have to pay taxes on it, so you're really making $80,000 a year. It's the same thing. So their higher numbers might be their gross numbers, but how much they're making as a business standpoint, the margins are so thin there.
Yeah, you're right.
In states where it's more limited, like Illinois, the margins are greater, so businesses can stand to make more money.
Yeah.
But the thing about cannabis is, for anybody who's a dispensary owner or wants to be one, it all goes back to community. It's community driven. You have to engage your community to want to choose to come into your location,
right?
Because there is access to go to another one.
Right.
So engage your communities and
then you come up with appealing things like this where you can get fresh donuts and coffee. And I think I might grab some snacks on the way out. But it's kind of crazy that I saw some people just come in and they bought like baked goods and left. I was like, aren't you going to go to the dispensary? And they're like,
okay. I don't
thought
want
this
podcast
interesting
to end without telling one little story. It
doesn't
have to
go
do with
ahead.
Cash Wednesday, but it's along with what we're talking about. And it goes back to dispensaries are becoming more of an experience. You want to experience something when you go back to you're not ready. But I just read in California, in West Hollywood, the owner of a sex boutique store called Pleasure Chest, which there's actually, I believe there's some here in Illinois and Chicago area, boutiques that are, for sex toys and stuff. And he also opened a dispensary across the street. And the whole theme is Pleasure Med is the name of the dispensary. So it just goes to show you that as time goes on and history is made, we're going to see more and more unique experiences at dispensaries when you walk into them.
Yeah.
As time goes on.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting.
A lot of good things to look forward to.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I think the only thing I've seen that reminds me of what you were just saying, in Colorado, we actually saw cannabis-infused lubricant.
So, okay, well, it's great. Would you like to have the founder of that on your show?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
She's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Tanya Griffin. We're going to introduce you to Tanya.
Cool.
She's
I think I've read about her.
In Illinois she was here this week for business.
Ah, damn.
I'm telling you. So yeah, there are products coming out that are, as you're alluding to, lubricants that are made with cannabis. Currently there's plenty out there with CBD enriched products that have effects as well, but now it's coming out with THC, cannabis infused products of all kind. It's just unique products coming to the marketplace, and we talked about some.
Which we won't be able to speak on behalf of, but I can say that I've read that. I don't want to like be like, oh yeah, I've heard that from all these women that I've been with. No, I've read that the product is good from the female perspective, from a woman's perspective, which is like you say, as you started the actually we weren't on air yet, but you were talking about differentiating yourself with your products, and you got that lighter. So yeah, there's another way to do it. So sorry though, I was giving you the space and then I like jumped in. You were talking about something and then I started in again on limited licenses and talking about Oregon, and then we talked about that. I wanted to hold my promise of giving you the space. Was there anything else that maybe you thought about that I didn't ask today, that you specifically wanted to speak about? I just wanted to be sure to give you the space.
I think just Cole, you just need to keep doing what you're doing, and people around you are going to continue to gravitate when they see what you're about. And from an industry perspective, being on the business side of it, it's a super exciting time in Illinois and across the country as more and more growth is happening. More and more consumption lounges are occurring. Licenses just opened up in Nevada for the first time. They granted, I think, 7 or 10 or 50 initial licenses for consumption lounges. And you're going to see that around the state. So I just think it's a great time to be around cannabis from a business perspective, from a consumer. More and more brands means more and more options. And so that's always a good thing from a consumer standpoint. More and more options and more acceptance as time goes on. And we're all going to be a part of history, as we go forward with it in every way.
Well, I want to just thank you for not only giving me your time today and sharing weed with me and sharing stories with my audience, but for doing what you did in cannabis history.
That's so nice, Cole. You know what I want to thank you for? Passing me the lighter. That would be really,
hey, you got it.
Thank you for
You're
passing
welcome.
that. No, keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
Yeah.
I'll be definitely following you 100%.
Do you remember how you first found me or saw me? Do you remember it all? I know that might be hard to ask.
Did I first find you? It definitely was Instagram, 100%. 100% Instagram.
Cool.
I'm like, who is this kid? I got to check this out. Now, like, I would laugh, like, a lot. So I'm like, who is this kid?
I am not saying that I'm funny, but I do try to blend comedy into some of the things I do.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. It's funny. I notice all your stuff you add to it, all your little memes and all the little add-ons you make it entertaining.
Try.
But you get your message across, which is key.
Yeah.
And you definitely have a new supporter in me. Well, you always had me as a supporter. But
yeah.
Now you'll have me as a supporter.
Well, hell yeah. Well, I'll just say this as we step away. If any stories come up that you're like, oh shit, I should have said, you know how that is.
Sure.
I should have told that on the podcast. Just call me. We can do it via Zoom, or we can even maybe something happen.
No, I'm coming to Champaign.
That'd be cool.
No, I will in a minute.
Sweet.
My aunt lives there. I have family.
Well, you should let me know when you come down.
Your family now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Please let
there.
me know. Let me know, and I'll have some homegrown goodies for you. So, well, folks, I hope you found as much value in this conversation as I did. I'm going to continue smoking joints with my friend here at OK Cannabis. See you, folks.
Big soul.
Yep.
That was awesome.